In fact, I remember when I was in college, my first year, I broke both of my wrists in an accident at the in a gym in college, my freshman year, because I had to keep my scholarship. I had to have grades of a B or better, and I broke both my arms, and I couldn't do my final English exam because I broke it 1 week before final exams the first semester, and the final exam for English composition was to write on some particular subject, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't write, so they gave me an incomplete, and I thought I was going to lose my scholarship over that, but fortunately they accepted it and just disregarded that one until I completed it later. It turned out to be kind of an interesting story in itself, because when I got ready to graduate my senior year, I had completed all the coursework and was making application for graduation, and the registrar sent me a letter saying that I was ineligible to graduate because I did not have freshman English, even though I had, well, the first semester, it was 2 semesters of English, and the first semester I not had, and the second semester I did. And then there has at Mississippi State that time, at the end of your the sophomore year, you had to write a English comprehensive exam. If you don't pass that, you have to take a remedial English. Well, I had passed the English comprehensive exam at the end of my sophomore year to begin junior year. So I had all of the requirements except that one incomplete. Well, I finally found the professor and got the grade corrected, and so I did graduate with it, but it did cause some concern because I didn't know it. The incomplete had never been removed from my record until graduation, so when I got that. But anyway, I went on in electrical engineering and got my degree.
Let's rewind a little bit. So you had in college, were you involved? Were you still involved with like 4-H, or were there other organizations?
No, I worked. I wasn't. I was in a fraternity. My older brother was there. He was 2 years ahead of me, and he was in the Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity, and he got me in as a sophomore when I did. But most of my time was working. I had a job at the school working in the high voltage laboratory at Mississippi State. It's interesting because I was testing hardware for 500 kV, 500,000 volt transmission lines. At that time, there wasn't any in operation in the United States, and it was just beginning to get interest. So a lot of the companies had hired the university to do testing on high voltage switchgear.
What was the current transmission voltage?
I think about 230 kV is about what they had, because we had to get 500 kV, we had to series 230 volt transformers, because we put one up on insulators, and the neutral side, which is normally grounded, went to the high voltage connection of the first one. It was sitting on the ground, so you had the 2 transformers sitting there, one up on insulators and one down. By putting them in series, we could get 500 kV to test the line equipment. So I worked in the high voltage laboratory all 4 years of my school. In fact, that was one of the things that I was able to do with my scholarship. I had to work for the school as one of the conditions of it. So I worked all 4 years in testing things, and I was working about, I think the maximum they would allow was 20 hours a week. So I was putting in about 20 hours a week in the high voltage lab. After I took my classes, I'd go work. And since it was right there in the same area where I took my coursework, I could work 2 or 3 hours between different classes. So with that, and then later on I was in the fraternity, but I didn't really participate very much in a lot of fraternity activities because it was a time when I really couldn't, except on weekends. That's when we really did something. Since I didn't go home or anything, the school was too far from home, and I only went home on holidays. And so that's most of my time in college was either working or classwork or studying.
So you did college, like what you should be doing. doing.
Yeah, yeah. So
So when did you meet Bubby?
that was I met Diane at a Halloween party, and I believe it was in 1959. I think it was at a Halloween party my junior year. A group of us from the fraternity went over for a party that the Diane was going to MSCW, which is Mississippi State College for Women. It was an all-girls college. And she was a freshman there and was at the school-sponsored Halloween party. And a group of us from the fraternity went over. And we had, it was kind of a set-up thing where a group of us, I think it was 4 of us, went over. And there was a group of girls that we met and mingled together. And I met her at that Halloween party. And she and I hit it off. And she had to go back home because I think her grandfather or somebody in the family had just passed away, and she had to go back home. So I had asked her for a date, and she said no because I've got to go home. And I said, well, I guess that's it. But anyway, she said, well, call me in a couple of weeks or something. So I did, and I talked to her, and then we set up another time, and that started the romance. And then when I graduated, she was still going to school. So when she started her junior year, I was going to the officer candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island. So that year, while I was in officer candidate school, she was going to her junior year. Well, she was worried that I was going to go off in the Navy and forget about her, I guess. And anyway, after I got my commission, let's see, we got engaged while she was a junior. Yeah, that's what it was. I was trying to remember when. But we got engaged and then got married after I got my commission. And we had a military type wedding. I was in my dress whites, Navy uniform. In fact, I got a picture of us, a wedding picture with me in the uniform. And we got married on July 7th in 1962. And then it's kind of interesting. We went to South Carolina. We rented an apartment. And after getting married and then going back there, getting leave to get married turned out to be kind of an interesting thing because the Navy kind of had a policy. Once you got assigned to a ship, you couldn't get leave for a while. Well, since I'd already promised to get married, when I graduated, the executive officer allowed me to, actually I had 5 days of leave, go home, get married, come back. Well, we kind of came through this area in Tennessee on our honeymoon. We came through Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg as our source, our honeymoon. And then from there went to Charleston, South Carolina, where I was based. So once we had an apartment rented, and she got set up in an apartment, and I kissed her goodbye and got on the ship, and I left her there because I went to sea and I didn't get back for another month. So she was there by herself just about, and fortunately there was other wives of other officers that get together as a group when the ship is out.
So this would have been the summer of '62?
62. And
she was still in school at the time?
No, she dropped out at the end of her junior year. So she didn't get her degree. Her father was quite upset about that and getting married, but that's the way things worked out.
I think it worked out.
And after college, between my junior and senior year of college, I got a job with Florida Power and Light as a student intern, just for the summer between the years. So, and I went to near Venice, Florida, to work as a summer intern. That had been the first time I've been away from home in a long time. So I had gotten an old car. We bought a used Rambler. Trying to think, it was a Nash Rambler. That's what it was. It was a nice looking car, but it did okay. But we got down to Florida with it, and I worked one summer down there with Florida Power and Light, and then came back, finished up my degree. And at that time, I went to interview Mississippi Power and Light because they had furnished the scholarship. And I thought, well, I owed them something, so I went to see if they had a job. They said, no, they're not hiring. In fact, nobody was hiring because I was draft status. When I was a sophomore, in fact, it's the reason I joined the fraternity. At the end of my sophomore year, the end of my freshman year, I broke my arms. Okay, end of my sophomore, I say first semester. First semester, broke my arms as a freshman. First semester.
How did you break your arms?
I broke my arms. It was during a PE class, and we had outside activities. I don't remember what we were playing out there, but anyway, it started raining. Big rainstorm came over, so we went inside to the gym. So to entertain us doing physical exercise stuff, we had a backwards race across the basketball court, where the end line of the basketball court was the finish line. 5 feet behind it was a concrete block wall. Well, I ran backwards, won the race, and hit the wall full force and stuck my hands behind me and broke my wrist. I don't remember anything after that until I woke up in the hospital. It completely knocked me out. They called an ambulance and stuff, and they took me to the hospital, and I woke up with both my arms in a cast in the hospital, in the Starkville Hospital. So that's how I broke my arm. The end of my sophomore year, I had gone home because we had finished final exams for the end of the first semester sophomore year. So we had a short break before the next semester started, like 3 or 4 days. So I had gone home. No sooner than I got home, that night I got a call from my roommate. It was still at Mississippi State. He had not finished his exams, and he was going to stay over to the next semester. Called and said the dorm was on fire. This was old main dormitory at Mississippi State, and I was on the second floor somewhere, don't remember exactly in one section of it, but the whole building, it housed about 1,200 students. So it was a pretty big dorm, 4 floors high. It was built in a square around the courtyard inside it. And the building started burning around, and they couldn't put it out. It was too big for the local fire department, being 4 floors high, brick outside and everything else is inside. And it was built in the 1800s, so it was an old wood type construction, and it was a tremendous fire. Because I remember when we were still a good 50 miles away, we topped a hill coming toward Starkville, Mississippi, that early that next morning, and you could see the sky was just red, that 50 miles away. We got there and the dorm had burned. Well, fortunately my roommate, there was 3 of us in a room. Actually, my one roommate was with me in Jackson, and he and I drove back in the car. In fact, it was my parents' car. And my other roommate was still there. He was still finishing up. Well, he gathered as much stuff as he could out of the room. But he got some of my clothes, none of my books, and my Boy Scout uniform, and my Eagle badge and all of that stuff was in there, and it burned up in the fire. Well, we had 1,200 students, didn't have a place to stay, so the fraternity had a fraternity house off campus, and they had a few rooms. And so they doubled up on everything, and we put in extra bunks and stuff, and I went and stayed in the fraternity house for the rest of my sophomore year. And then they were building some new dormitories, so they finished up some beginning of my junior year, and we were able to get on campus, back on campus in my junior year. But that was kind of the backup thing. So
my mom, she specifically mentioned a pig scholarship. Was that related to you winning, like, the showing your the pigs? Like, Was that in your
Well,
competition?
I had the one of my big scholarships was the electric project, but I had some other scholarships that I had gotten, supplemental things, additional from the 4-H club, from I can't remember the name of them, but in fact I think I've got a letter of some awarding me some supplemental scholarships. Yeah, I had about 3 different ones. The biggest amount of expense that the money that I had saved in the 4-H club from the sale of the pigs and calves and stuff like that, and the crops, we saved, and that's what I went to school on. In addition to a student loan that I got, I think it was my senior year to finish up. But that was the result of my 4-H work to go to school. When I got out of college, I didn't have much of a loan, and I was able to pay that off pretty quickly. And fortunately, with all the 4-H and the scholarships that paid for my college. Diane, on the other hand, when she graduated, she had a pretty big student loan, and she had not graduated, but she still had to pay that loan back. Well, she went ahead and did graduate. When we were in Sanford, when I was working for Florida Power and Light, I was based in Sanford, Florida, working at the Sanford Power Plant, and she got to go back to school in DeLand, Florida, which was about 30 miles up the road. And at that time we had one child, Julie was our only child, and she had some friends that they babysat for us, so we'd take Julie over there, and Diane would go to school with some other friends.
What's Julie's birthday? She was 1964?
This was in 64, I think it was, yeah.
Okay, so let's...
Yeah, and she got her degree from Stetson University in DeLand. And she was pregnant with Mandy at that time, because she was well pregnant when she graduated. As a professor, when they handed the diploma to her, she said, "We made it." So, but that was because she graduated in June, and Mandy was born in August. So she was coming around, and some interesting tales that she has about being sick in chemistry class, because she'd get morning sickness and stuff, and in the chemistry class with all the smells of the chemicals and stuff. So she had to be a chemist.
Wow. That makes sense.
But after that, after she graduated, then I started back studying at night in Sanford to get my professional engineering license. I had taken the EIT while I was in school before I graduated, but you had to have actual experience to get your professional engineering. So since I was working for Florida Power and Light, I decided I better go ahead and finish the second half of that. So I studied at nighttime to get my PE exam, and I got that a few years later in 65, I think it was, 66, somewhere along in there. And then I decided I needed a master's degree. So I started going night times to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And I was still working in Sanford, and at that time we were building the power plant over at Cape Canaveral. And I was based over there, so we stayed in a motel for about 2 months, actually across the road from where we were building the power plant in Cape Canaveral. And I would commute back to Winter Park, which was about 50 miles away, to go to class. And that one, and then when we got transferred to Fort Lauderdale, I wanted to continue that because I started it, and Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton was the closest school that offered an MBA. And the reason I was so insistent on getting that is in the Navy, I had earned the right for the GI Bill at that time. The GI Bill was a very good program, and it basically paid you to go to college to get a degree. Well, since I already had my engineering degree, I said, well, I'm not going to let this thing expire. It's only good for so many years. If you didn't use it, you'd lose it. So I went back to school at Florida Atlantic, and the only thing is I had to take 2 courses at a time to qualify for the maximum benefit. So I had to take 2 graduate level courses, working full time, raising a family, and get my MBA. But they paid me enough to pay full tuition, plus books, plus some support for room and board, in effect. So I actually, each time I went to class, and I actually made money going to school. So I went ahead and got my MBA, and I think it was 1974 when I got